How do you take charge of your own learning and shape your own learning environment? If any of you have comments about that.
When you say shaping your learning environment, what exactly are you getting at?
You're in a team and one of your senior residents comes out of seeing a patient and makes a fat joke about the patient, which is very, very common on the wards, and then if you just stand there and people laugh and you don't, but you don't say anything, it's okay to make fun of patients, and I started learning, well, I don't think it's okay, and I might speak up and say, well, actually, I know this patient. She's had a pretty unfortunate life. I learned that I can, by speaking up or not speaking up, I create a certain culture.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point and your example, I think yeah, those situations pop up not too infrequently. And I think the best way to go about it is to lead by example, fairly assertively, and people pick up that you're not the kind of person to participate in that kind of conversation. It's just kind of, it happens in the OR too. Patient goes to sleep and, someone makes a comment that you feel is a little inappropriate. I think if you just pretty firmly don't participate in those conversations, people generally pick it up. And then you create a little culture around you and in your particular OR or when you're rounding. And I think if you lead by example, people usually, if you really stick to it, people will follow. And I'll say that you, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's people are overworked or people are just looking to make conversation, but there is a gravitational pull towards being a little bit negative sometimes in the hospital and medical settings in general. And I think really avoiding that gravitational pull is a good idea, because I've never participated in conversations like that and felt good afterwards. And for whatever reason, it can be tempting for some people. And in some situations when something, in the OR, for example, oftentimes when a patient's asleep, they will soil themselves, and then someone will make a comment, and then and then it just goes on this negative hallway that never feels good. So I would just say stay away from it, because it's not it never turns out making you feel good about your work.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know, Layla or Rand, did you have any?
Yeah. I have, so kind of like what Matt was saying, I think that as your job, when you become a resident or a doctor, it's your job to advocate for your patients. So I think, I have some other things for the incorporating a learning environment, but at the end of the day, these people are at their most vulnerable. They are not in their clothes, they are sick, they are relying on you to take good care of them. They're afraid, even if they won't mention it. They might be saying some profanities at you, and I think a lot of the time, whenever you have somebody that's giving you pushback or something, it's good to take a step back and say, this is not a me versus them situation. This is a situation that is unique to them, where they are afraid, they are vulnerable. And, if people start making kind of snide comments or rude comments, you'd be like, hey, they are going through a lot. Even something simple like that can really make somebody try to retract. Because then they're like, oh, it sounds really crappy what I just said. Yeah, or there's this, I think we learned it at Drexel, but if you can say, sorry, what did you say? People don't want to repeat it.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, it works. No one wants to say, hey, they smell like poop, or ew, that's so, no one wants to repeat themselves when they say something that's crappy. So try it. Thank you, Drexel. It does work. But in terms of promoting a good learning environment, a lot of the time when you have learners on board, including myself, but if I'm working with a med student and there's something that is interesting, or there is a new physical exam finding, I like to point it out. And a lot of the time they say, well, why is that happening? And I'll be like, I don't know, but we can look it up together and we can learn about it. And that is a perfectly acceptable response, because sometimes you will pick up things that your attendings might not pick up. Sometimes a medical student will bring something to light that you didn't even notice at all. So I think being humble and knowing that you have a lot to contribute, but you have a lot to learn from other people is very helpful.
That's so, it's so true and so amazing. Bren, final comment.
I really like what was said, and I think the negativity thing is something that I've noticed a lot. Like, it's like easy to get cynical quick, even like this, just like, you know, whatever, how many months we're into it. And I feel like it's just like Matt said, it's never going to make you feel good. So just like not participating or trying to change the subject. That's usually what I do, because I'm like kind of awkward and I don't like to stand out to people. So if anyone out there is like me and can't do that, changing the subject or just ignoring it is really effective. Even if it's, you know, sometimes it's about patients and sometimes it's just about your situation. Like, I find sometimes if you're with somebody who's complaining about, like, I don't know, you're attending or like how long rounds take or whatever, or like an annoying, whatever it is, like, it's like gonna only make you feel worse to chime in. And sometimes it just potentiates and you're just talking negative all the time. So I feel like I try to get out of those cycles quick. And then I liked what Layla said too about like looking stuff up with med students, because that happens to me a lot. Like, I don't think I was prepared for how much of a teacher I have to be all the time. And like, med students ask stuff and I'm like, oh gosh, I have no idea. And I think honestly, sometimes they know more than I do because they're closer out of step one or whatever. But it's like the way we have it set up in like medicine these days, like you can like enter an order in Epic, and Epic like does like most of the work for you. You know, like Epic has like the suggested doses, and like you can put the indications and the pharmacist will take care of it. So it kind of like makes me feel like I'm being lazy sometimes. So Up to Date is like my best friend, and I will like look up stuff just for fun. And then like when I'm there, I'll try to read like a little bit more than I need to, just so I like learn something. So that's like something that I do every day. Like if I'm trying to see how like Flagyl is dosed for treating trick, I'll like look at the dosing and then I'll like read one more thing about it just to say I learned something. So
That's so great. I so appreciate all of your wisdom. So thanks so much. And I
Dennis.
know this is going to be really valuable for our fourth year students.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.